We will continue to tick that clock forward as the eye is moving forward and the winds start increasing all the way up the coast to Palm Coast and Flagler Beach, where this afternoon, early afternoon, mid-afternoon, you could be looking at gusts to 90, potentially upwards of 100 miles per hour. Again, watching the movement going up in wind speed if that eye is closer to the coast. If that eye is offshore, that wind speed will come down just a bit, but still destructive winds expected in parts of Brevard and Volusia County. I do want to check in with Mallory, and you're getting some of the current wind gusts at some of the stations. In between here, we're getting some other gusts, but you've got a good general idea of what we're looking at as far as those gusts are concerned.
Yeah, Brian, that's right. We do have some high wind gusts there along the East Coast, especially as you can see in Melbourne, 66-mile-an-hour wind gust, 54 for Daytona Beach. We're not getting readings right now in Palm Coast, but we did get word just a little while ago that David Bowden is in Flagler County. Do we still have the ability to check in with him? Okay, yeah, let's then send it over to David Bowden. Give us the latest, David, on what's happening there in Flagler Beach or Flagler County. It's not as close to the eye wall, but it's still some hazardous conditions.
Well, let me tell you, we are here now at the Flagler County EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, and just as we were pulling up, all the lights went out. We had all the lights going out, and we have been getting some very strong gusts of wind out here, and I'm sure we'll just see another wave in a matter of moments where these trees will start to blow. The stop signs are now flickering back and forth, and here it comes. We can see the winds picking up. You can see the tree there in the distance. We're getting very strong winds here. We had to move. We were at the foot of the bridge that leads out to the barrier islands. We had to leave that area because of the strong winds and rain that were coming in there. We went to seek shelter, and now we're at the EOC Center. We're surrounded on three sides by concrete. Just this opening here for us to be able to see outside, because there are some damaging winds that are coming our way. You can feel it outside. The rain is going basically horizontally. The winds are picking up, and they're being more consistent, more constant. We are seeing the winds come, and when they come for a much longer period of time than they were earlier this morning. So this is a situation that we are, obviously, you guys are monitoring very closely. We are monitoring here, and the lights just came on moments ago. They had flickering lights inside. The emergency lights went on inside the EOC Center, and all of the street lights, everything went out here. It was pitch black out here for probably about 2 minutes before everything came back on again. So this is a very developing situation, and it's going to continue to develop throughout the day, and we'll be listening and waiting on your every word to hear what's happening next.
Yeah, thanks, David Bowden. A great report there from Flagler County, starting to get those conditions really dropping with the high winds starting to pick up. But one other concern is the storm surge. So I want to show you first here some of the wave heights for Brevard County. Notice they're from around 11 feet up to even some areas just off the Cape Canaveral coastline up to 18 feet for those wave heights. Now, this is not the storm surge. These are just wave heights. We have those strong winds that's pushing that wall of water toward the East Coast. So Volusia County up into Flagler County also getting some high wave heights there as well, 13 to 15 feet. Now, if we look at our storm surge, this is the potential for some of that inundation of those higher wave heights. Now, high tide not occurring until about 12:30 p.m., so we're not too concerned with that right now. But with those high wave heights close to shore, we could see along the Volusia-Flagler County line maybe a storm surge up to 11 to 13 feet. Down in Brevard County could be anywhere between 7 to 9 feet with those storm surge heights there that could be moving inland and flooding the coastal areas, causing beach erosion here as we continue throughout today with Hurricane Matthew. And I think we have reporters all over Central Florida at this point, but I'm going to send it back to Brian Carrick real quick for a quick update on the radar.
Yes,
Brian?
Thank you, Mallory, and I do want to bring you up to speed on a couple different things. First, we're going to start with the fact that we still have in place that extreme wind warning for northeastern Brevard County, and we gave you a bunch of locations, and I'll go over them again here as we're looking at the radar. I'm going to put this into motion. We've got the very latest information coming in. This storm is not going to make a landfall on the Cape. It's not going to make a landfall on the Cape because it's 25 miles east of Cape Canaveral. So it's got to jaunt a ways west to make land. So right now, we're calling it a non-landfall at the Cape. So we're not going to see, at this point, if this continues on its track, it's moving north-northwest and it's picked up steam at 14 miles per hour, Matthew is going to eventually turn north. And right now, the way we are seeing this, not make a landfall in Florida. So with it being east of Cape Canaveral, and that point sticks out far enough, close to that storm, on its current track north-northwest at 14, picking up some steam, the good news, if there's good news, and obviously it's hard to say that when we've got a major hurricane off our coast, if there is a glimmer of good news, it's that we are not going to see a landfalling hurricane in Matthew here in the Sunshine State today or tomorrow. So we do want to watch it curl back around to the north, and then eventually on down the line. We'll get into that next week as it could start wrapping back around. But that is one thing that we're checking right now. Mallory, do you have some new information?
Yeah, just very quickly, we got an update from Port Canaveral, a wind gust of 102 miles per hour.
Okay, I think that was it was at a tower, right?
Yeah.
So probably about 54 feet off the ground, but that's starting to translate to the ground. So thank you for that update. I told you I would give you some locations and let you know, because some of you are listening. Shiloh, Maytown, Rancha, Allenhurst, Dammit Grove, Dummit Grove, my apologies on that, East Mims, Titusville. You folks all should be sheltering inside the safest part of your shelter. Indian River City, Delaspine, Sharps, Cape Canaveral, Merritt Island, Cocoa, Rockledge, Cocoa Beach, and folks north, and that includes Vieira as well. You folks should be inside the safest part of your shelter because we're getting the winds translating toward the ground. Now, I'm going to go into the radar a little bit more here in just a second, but we do want to check in with Scott Feist out in Sanford. Scott, we just had a recent gust at Sanford International Airport of 44 miles per hour, plus earlier today, or I should say yesterday now, Thursday, picking up 5, 6, almost 7 inches of rain, and it looks like you're getting pelted once again.
Brian, I believe you that it is 44 miles per hour. We are here in downtown Sanford, just right off of the marina, and we're really starting to feel the effects of Matthew here in Seminole County. Take a look behind me. If you are up joining us at 3 o'clock in the morning, we showed you this boat behind me. This is a houseboat. Sanford police tell me that earlier this morning it was actually anchored out in... it was actually anchored out over here in the St. Johns River. It has broken free, and the boat is now up against this seawall here, and it is being absolutely pelted. About 3 hours ago, it was just kind of gently knocking against the dock. At this point, it is hitting the dock so hard. The past few moments, we have seen its windshield not only pop out, but shatter, and then, of course, blow in these 44-mile-per-hour winds. That's why we are standing in front of the boat, not exactly next to it. Now, Sanford police tell me that they expect the water here along the St. John River to rise. When it rises, they believe this boat is going to topple over into the street and then be deposited here in the street. Here's why. If you've ever been on I-4 in Seminole County, you've seen in between the eastbound and westbound lanes, you've seen those retention ponds. A lot of times they're covered in cattails. Those ponds actually hold water that's coming down from DeBerry. That water in DeBerry is pumped from that community out to those retention ponds along I-4 and then into the St. Johns River. That prevents, they hope, flooding in the DeBerry area. Now, the St. Johns River is Florida's longest river. It stretches 310 miles and it flows to the north. So all the water collects here and then it actually has to travel all the way past St. Augustine up to the Jacksonville area before it exits out into the Atlantic Ocean. So the water here that the Sanford police believes will continue to rise throughout the morning hours and the afternoon hours, well after Matthew passes us. That's because of all of those retention ponds doing their job, pushing the water here to the St. Johns River. And again, they think that this houseboat behind me eventually will, for lack of a better term, beach itself here in downtown Sanford. We're keeping an eye on it, as well as the wind. If you look out into right now the St. Johns River, the waves earlier today were about maybe 3 feet. We're actually seeing waves at this point coming ashore, lapping over the seawall that are anywhere between maybe 5, 6 feet. Excuse me, these are pretty serious waves. that are starting to come into downtown Sanford here in Seminole County. I'll send it back to you.
All right, Scott, stay safe out there. Obviously, we are not putting Scott in a dangerous place. You've got gusts to 44, but you can get that in an afternoon thunderstorm here in Central Florida. But kind of getting a little seasick watching that boat, which has come loose, and Scott's going to watch that as well. Stay safe out there. Right now, I do want to also go in and check in with Christina Jensen. She's at Daytona Beach, and Christina, are you near the EOC, and what are you seeing out there right now?
Yeah, that's right, Brian. We are at the EOC parking lot because conditions were so bad we had to seek shelter. At one point, we were in downtown Daytona, but the wind was coming down. Right now, the rain is coming down, and county officials are urging people to stay inside. Now is not the time to leave your house. Now is the time to seek shelter because it is there's poor visibility on the roadways. There's lots of rain coming down. There's also objects flying. Now, I want to show you just a live look at that rain and how gusty it is. Wind is blowing at 45 miles per hour. Now, in terms of power, most of Daytona Beach still has power. There's about 2,200 customers in the county without power. Right now, there are no major reports of any major damage, but if there is, we're going to continue to keep you updated. We're going to be live updating you throughout the morning because Hurricane Matthew is here. We want you guys to be protected. We want you guys to know what is happening. Now reporting it live in Daytona Beach, Christina Jensen, News 13.
Thank you, Christina. And yes, as Christina mentioned, we made sure that we got her to safety when we knew that it was becoming a little too dangerous at Daytona Beach. She made her way to safety over toward the EOC. You saw conditions were a little calmer there now, but starting to pick up again. And Daytona Beach, this will slide in your direction, and you will see your winds continue to crank throughout the morning, probably late morning for you, and then up to Palm Coast and Flagler Beach, late morning, early afternoon for some of your worst conditions on this current path, current movement. But once again, as the weather experts here at News 13 are looking at the radar, Storm Tracker 13 Doppler radar, measuring things out, extrapolating, doing the math, this is not going to make landfall here in Florida. It's not going to turn sharply to the left. We don't have to worry about that. Could it wobble west? Yes, it could wobble west, but by the time it gets north of the Cape, it's got to wobble west a ways to get back to our coast. So the worst conditions with Hurricane Matthew will translate to the east and northeast side of this storm, staying offshore. Again, though, I have to reiterate that we will still see some extensive damage along coastal areas of central northern Brevard up into central southern Volusia as these winds translate down and continue to sustain themselves, potentially at over 100 miles per hour. And Maureen, I know we are still in that extreme wind warning until 7:15 for northeastern Brevard. I have a feeling there may be an extension to that into southern Volusia at some point because those winds are moving that way.
Yeah, I think so. And with the 6 a.m. advisory report did come in that a wind gust of 100 miles per hour occurred on Cape Canaveral. And our Cocoa Beach camera, I just had it up. I just had it showing the wind. I don't know if it went down or if there's a power outage in the area, so I guess we can't show you much there, but did want to show you the rain and the wind occurring in Cocoa Beach. We'll move past that, and of course, we'll be able to see a lot more of our cameras once the sun comes up. After the top of the 7 o'clock hour, that's when we should get some better visibility. I'll go over to the wall with these graphics right now if you want to take that full, and we'll look at the conditions deteriorating, of course, in Brevard County because of what's happening with the extreme wind warning. Going back over to the winds elsewhere in Central Florida, it's also critical to note the direction because as the winds gradually turn more to the west-northwest or west, that's a sign that the eye is lifting to the north and we're going to see a change in direction of the winds. And even in Melbourne, we're getting that this hour. This is a sustained wind. Of course, they have been a lot stronger, as Brian has been showing you on Storm Tracker 13 with those peak gusts that have been upwards of 100 miles per hour. Walking you through the day hour by hour to show you where the winds are going to be strongest. Again, we're talking about a hurricane very close to Cape Canaveral, but the field of hurricane force winds does extend out about 45 miles from the center. Of course, as this moves further away, of course, because of the curvature of our coastline here, The impacts will lessen for Volusia County, but watch what happens throughout the first part of the day. We're still going to be looking at tropical storm force winds as the storm moves its way north, and by 8 o'clock tonight it's going to be lifting closer to Jacksonville. Still windy, but you can tell how we'll be back to westerly winds, which will mean the storm has passed to our north. But this morning most of the winds have been very gusty out of the north to northwest. Tomorrow's still a breezy day, but nowhere near what we're dealing with right now. Going to change the time on this, but we do have a few more areas added to the flood warning. We've had a flood watch posted area wide, but now the flood warning, which means flooding imminent, that includes inland areas. So we're not just dealing with the coastal impacts. This is from rain, but then you add on to the effects of storm surge, and that is going to cause the water to be even higher. Rainfall potential exists within that range of 4 to 8 inches. We've been saying that all along, and as viewers and observers start to wake up, we'll get more reports in of how much rain has fallen overnight, and we'll check out the CocoRoss network for that. But through 8 a.m., another 2 inches possible in these areas, and then as the day wears on, we're still going to have that wraparound effect where additional rain bands will occur, and we may see 2 to 5 inches, even inland areas, which is why that flood threat is so concerning for the I-4 corridor, especially the usually prone areas that we get flooding with during our afternoon thunderstorms as we look on a typical day in Florida. Of course, it's anything but typical with a Category 3 storm on our doorstep. I'll go in for a closer view here to show you the eye and what the eye is doing. If anything, in the last couple of frames does seem as though it's closing in a little bit, getting a little bit smaller in size, but the extreme wraparound effect here, some of the heaviest bands are now out over the water, which is good. We want them to stay out there, and as the storm travels to the north-northwest, it would keep a lot of those most intense bands off the coastline. But we are looking at the western edge of this just over Cape Canaveral with some of our strongest winds and with some of our heaviest rainfall, and that is going to continue its path to the north-northwest. Another look at the latest on Matthew. If you're just waking up, just joining us, we still have a Category 3 storm, and the water vapor loop showing the intensity that kind of dropped off a little bit in the last hour with the rainfall that was strongest on the left side of the storm. Now we're seeing some of that out over the water, and of course that is away from land, which is what we like to see. The latest forecast track continues a path to the north-northwest, and as Brian was saying the last hour, seeing that it's still moving to the north-northwest and not to the west or northwest, that would keep it away from land. Of course, any wobble would have bigger implications to bring those steadiest bands even further inland. But for now, we are dealing with tropical storm and hurricane force winds, and Mallory's going to join us now with a little bit more on what we can expect this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Maureen. We do have reporters all over Central Florida trying to keep them safe, so we're bringing them in and sending them out depending on what the weather is in that area. But one person that we do want to talk to is Jerry Hume in Melbourne, and he is reporting maybe some wind damage happening in that area. So Jerry, what's happening there in Melbourne? Okay, we might be having trouble with Jerry Hume at this point. Maybe we can get out to him in just a moment. But again, reporting the potential for some wind damage in Melbourne. That's reporting from Jerry Hume, where we have gotten wind gusts in excess of 100 miles per hour in some of those areas. It looks like we have the shot up there. So yeah, Jerry, tell us what's going on in that area.
Yeah, we do have some wind damage, Mallory, from Hurricane Matthew. The wind's so strong here in Melbourne. I want you to take a look. Just before 6 o'clock this morning, we saw this awning move across the road here, US 192. It's now in the median, as you can see. Cars are slowing down. We've only seen a couple cars out here, but they are slowing down. We've seen several transformers explode. We've seen that green light, and you can see power right here is out. We do have some lamps on right here in the Melbourne City Hall parking lot, but generally the lights that we have seen all morning long are out. We know that more than 100,000 customers are out of power here in Brevard County. According to Florida Power and Light, that's 1/3 of Brevard County. That's all because of this wind we're seeing out here. Not too bad right now. We are seeing some rain. The wind isn't as strong as what we have seen, especially when the hurricane was moving parallel to where we are. We're just a few blocks from the intercoastal the Indian River, and a few miles from the barrier island where those mandatory evacuations are. That is the latest here in Melbourne. I'm Jerry Hume. Back to you.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, reporting on some extreme conditions taking place along the east coast there in Brevard County, and that eye wall skirting the coast at this point just offshore of Brevard County, and places like Volusia, Flagler County starting to get some of those deteriorating effects from Hurricane Matthew. But we do want to get the latest on the radar picture, and for that I'm going to give it back to Brian here.
All right, thank you, Mallory. Yes, we are still watching the eye. It's moving off to the north-northwest now, and going to switch the source to show you this storm. It's a sizable hurricane, and it's still a powerful hurricane, but as we're seeing it right now, the eye is just east of the Cape. This is what we were kind of thinking earlier today. It was wobbling a little bit, so it was hard to tell, but as we extrapolated, it was going to come very, very close to the tip of the Cape, out near the launch pads, and now it's a little more evident that this is going to stay off the Cape because it's 25 miles east of Cape Canaveral, and as I'm looking at the outer eye walls, some of the large eye here, they're offshore, and they're going to stay that way. We want it to continue, though, on the north-northwest, then eventually north track. So those of you in Volusia County, don't let your guard down now, because if it does, for some reason, go through a cycling of the eye wall again, or wobbles west a little bit, that starts to throw the strongest winds toward you and inland a bit. But right now, the way we're seeing this, and its current movement with that north component to the northwest, the north-northwest component, it's going to skirt just offshore and continue up the shoreline. And that's our hope at this point. Keep this thing out, because the strongest wind, the worst part of this hurricane, it stays out to sea on the east and northeast side. But I do have to once again inform you that if you're just joining us and you live in northeastern Brevard County, you are in an extreme wind warning. And that's why we're staying with you, because this is a very serious situation. When you sustain the winds at 111 plus for several hours, let's say 111 to 120 for several hours, you're going to start to do some major damage to even well-built structures. The gables are going to start to give a bit, and you're going to obviously lose shingles. Siding is going to peel off. Lots of trees are going to be damaged or uprooted as well. So this is why when the officials say time for you to move on out, move yourself inland, that's why we want you to do so, and don't ignore those requests. Those of you that are there now and can't leave, the best thing you can do is shelter within your shelter. Shelter in that safest part, and that's going to be your safe bet. And you're probably listening to us. Maybe you've got us on your tablet or your iPad. Hopefully you charged, because you're going to be without power. You're going to lose power. And that is probably a given here in northern Brevard and southern Volusia County. Communities like Delaspine, Frontenac, Williams Point, Sharps, Courtenay. Courtenay, you're going to lose power more than likely as well. Cape Canaveral, Merritt Island, you're going to come close to losing that power as these winds crank up. This extends up through Indian River City, Titusville, Wilson, as well as Mims, Allenhurst, Dummit Grove, Shiloh. Eventually that'll translate toward Oak Hill, because the hurricane force winds do extend out 60. I've got this zoomed out a bit to show you the size, but I want to zoom back in, give you a distance, and again show you the movement, and then I'm going to take a look at the wind product. First I want to take a look at the movement here. Moving to the north-northwest, so it's kind of wobbling like this. And notice the path keeps it offshore. Again, those of you in Volusia County and Flagler County, though, you're going to watch this with us for several hours now. This still has to make it up the coast without wobbling back toward the west much. So let's take a look at some of the distances. And Mallory, Maureen, one of you get that really cool 3D view.
Got it right here.
Yeah, great. And I'll have you guys show that in a second, because you can show the bubbling up of the storms that are going around this and wrapping around. I'm going to translate the wind product for you. We'll take a look at it again. Pretty colors, I know. You're looking at it going, well, what does that mean? Well, for us, we're trained on how to read this. That's why we're here for you, to help you. In a given tornadic type of situation, we'd be looking for reds and greens. Green colors going toward the radar. and that would be the wind going toward the radar. The reds, you're going back away from that radar. And so you're taking that wind, and in the tornado, you're putting those greens and reds together in a counterclockwise fashion. So you look at your clock, you go the opposite direction, and that's where we would be looking for the potential for rotation. This is a sizable rotation. It's a hurricane, and so we're looking at even brighter colors because you're exceeding some of the color palettes here, and we're looking for the brightest whites and the brightest pinks. So I'll first measure off the coast of Melbourne Beach in the Atlantic. It looks like the highest winds are about 20 to 25 miles offshore. But look at the Cape, and I'll take you from, it looks like it's near one of the launch pads along the coast, and this is 5 to maybe 8 miles offshore, but translating toward the coast and coming down to the ground. We've had several tower reports exceeding 100 miles per hour on Cape Canaveral. We've had a couple of ground reports as well, close to 100, and at least 80 to 90. And you are starting to see some damage because of those winds. You will see trees down. You will see power lines down. So let me back this out again. Let me take a sampling here in the middle. 85, 87. Again, this is well offshore of Melbourne and Mico and Floridana Beach in the Atlantic. It's well offshore. So your winds are not as strong at this point. Jerry Hume's been tracking it with his anemometer, and obviously we've had some damage in the Melbourne area. But nearing the Cape, we're talking winds 91, 105, 111. And this is why there's an excessive wind warning for this area right now, as those winds are translating over to the communities I mentioned, from Oak Hill and Allenhurst down toward Merritt Island, Wilson and Mims included. And those can translate inland toward I-95. So if you live in southern Volusia down to central Brevard and all points in between, that is where we're going to look at the potential for those winds to exceed 100 miles per hour. That warning in effect until 7:15. We'll see if it's extended up the coastline. We're going to see how far these winds translate, but that is what we're looking at for the damaging wind gusts, the sustained winds, and the excessive winds at this point. Now, Maureen, I think you were, Mallory, you're going to actually, or Maureen, you're going to show us, you got the, do you have that 3D, that really cool view?
I do, and it's showing something interesting too. I want to start out because I think the Cocoa Beach camera is back. I know we couldn't see that last time, and I know visibility's poor. It's not a whole lot to see right now, but you get the indication of the wind that is taking place there. Also want to note that a report came in, I don't know if Brian mentioned this already, a wind gust to 61 miles per hour in the last few minutes at the Flagler EOC near Bunnell. So it's not just the coastal areas, it's the inland spots. So we can go over to the wall with these graphics here, show you what's happening. And with this camera, we'll be able to see our other ones after sunrise, which will be a little bit after 7:20. But want to remind you, as if you're watching us now and you still have power, there's a chance you may lose power. And some people may already be listening to us on the radio. So we will be available at different times throughout the day with these partners. Something to keep in mind. And when we're talking about our graphics on air, we want to make sure that we're descriptive because some of you may not be able to see what we are talking about right now. So this is a way for you to get critical information if your power goes out. Of course, Storm Tracker 13 within our app, News 13 Plus, and hopefully you have a charger, a battery-operated charger, in the event your phone dies because you may be out power for quite some time. So now we've been talking about the eye wall, perhaps going through a replacement cycle based on this structure right here. But the most intense bands have now lifted to the north side of the low, and that means it's out over the water. And I'll be able to show you that from the 3D perspective in just a moment. That is where the core of the most intense rain is, the rainfall rate. Again, this is in an hour, thinking if the storm was stationary, which it's not, how much rain you would see. And this is just off the tip of Cape Canaveral right here. So some of these are going to move over land very shortly, but the brightest magentas and oranges indicating rain rates of over 3 inches an hour. Those are over water right now, which of course is a good thing, but they may come closer to northern Brevard County and southern Volusia County when we see the movement of this storm and the spiraling mechanism bringing some of those bands a little bit closer to land. Now, what was happening last hour, we had the most intense activity on the left side of the storm. We still have that within this batch right here, but you can see we don't have the taller clouds or the more intense bands. Those are out over the water. Again, on the northern side of the storm away from land because of the curvature of the Florida Peninsula. And you have to go further to the west to reach land once we get north of the Cape. So that should keep a lot of the most intense activity off the coast. But these bands still capable of wind gusts, and we've seen it already to 100 miles per hour. Cape Canaveral, the top of the 6 o'clock hour, we did have that, a wind gust being reported there. And also interior sections. I don't want to forget about you too, because you're waking up to wind-driven rain. We saw what Scott Feist was dealing with in Sanford, and our other reporters that are scattered around the area. These bands of rain still need to spiral inland. They may weaken somewhat, and we have to monitor what takes place here with the eye wall. But for now, we can tell by the 3D perspective, the taller the clouds, the brighter the red, the more intense these bands are. And these are not over land right now. Those are out over the water. And Matthew is a Category 3 storm moving to the north-northwest at 14. So after it passes north of the Cape, again, it has to go further to the west to reach land because of how the change appears in the size in the coast of Florida, the shape of it. That is going to have a big impact on how far inland we see these effects. Remember, the hurricane force winds are just one of the threats. Of course, we're dealing with very high wave heights. Of course, a lot of that is out over the water, but we've seen the rising water near the coast. The timing is such that through the midday hours, when we should see the water at its highest levels across central Florida, they should recede by 5, 6 o'clock tonight. You can see how the low will move to the north, and then the water levels will begin to come down. And I don't know if we want to go to something else, but I can spell out the impacts that we'll be feeling in all of our counties. Again, the southernmost fringes of Volusia County, here's where some of the winds will be the strongest associated with these bands that are just offshore Brevard County. And we're going to be looking further down the coast. We'll go to Brevard County next and talk about these impacts. But actually, we're going to go even further south of Brevard County to Fort Pierce. I believe we're going to be joined now by Jason Lanning, who is out in the field there. Hey, Jason.
Right, and it looks like we have maybe another hour or two at the most for this final band on the backside of Hurricane Matthew to cross through Fort Pierce. I give you a live look here right behind us, though, outside of our hotel. We do have at least one downed tree here thanks to one of those higher wind gusts. We never quite hit hurricane force winds here, but we did have some tropical storm force sustained winds for several hours overnight. That led to more than 30,000 power outages here just across St. Lucie County. Of course, as this storm pushes out, the EOC here in St. Lucie County still asking people to shelter in place. That's because of downed power lines, downed trees, and we're still getting some bursts of some random wind gusts. And we do see injuries here in Florida with falling trees and other debris when folks think it might be safe to go out to assess damage maybe on their property. That can be a very dangerous situation. Of course, the power outages, though, will continue for the folks that did lose power here in St. Lucie County, with major power restorations maybe not getting underway here until later on this afternoon once this hurricane has fully cleared from our part of this state.
All right, thank you, Jason. And again, you're going to be dealing with that for a couple hours. The worst, though, is well off to your north now, so some improvement Indian River and St. Lucie County, but from Brevard County north, and especially central and northern Brevard County into Volusia County, that's where we're looking at some of the worst weather right now. And those winds are really gusting. Just had another gust to 101 at a tower in Cape Canaveral. And when I say tower, we're talking about 54 feet off the ground. That gust to 101, but some of that translating down to the ground, and that's why we have that excessive or extreme wind warning in place. We want to check in again with Jerry Hume down in Melbourne. Jerry, you were sharing some damage with us earlier, plus we had some transformers blowing behind you. What's the very latest down in Melbourne right now?
Brian, I believe the winds have changed, at least from what I am seeing. The rain is now going towards the north. It was going towards the south So we're seeing that difference. Also seeing the winds calm down a little out here. We're still dealing with rain. I want you to take a look down below. We've been looking at this pond that has been forming. This was pretty much empty at midnight when we arrived here, and you can see it's pretty full right now. But I do want you to take a look at that wind damage. That awning moved across the street there, US 192, shortly before 6 from those powerful wind gusts. Winds also responsible for knocking out power to 100,000 customers here in Brevard County. That's according to Florida Highway Patrol. We can see some of the power lines right here are still wobbling in the wind, and a lot of the power lights that we have seen throughout the morning are out. Others are on, so we're still waiting for crews to turn those lights back on. But a dramatic change in conditions out here. We, of course, will keep you updated. But for now, reporting live in Melbourne, Jerry Hume, News 13. Brian, back to you.
Thank you, Jerry. And yes, now that you're noticing the wind is shifting, coming around from more of a northwest direction, we're going to continue to wrap that back in and push this storm away from Melbourne. But now we're pushing it into Volusia County, and a recent gust in Edgewater to 71 miles per hour. And that was a ground measurement, the 71. The Cape Canaveral Tower I was talking about, now a gust 107. And again, that's up 54 feet off the ground, but 107, and that's coming closer and closer to the ground. Edgewater 71. So now up toward the New Smyrna Beach area. Edgewater Junction, on down through Ariel, Oak Hill, Creighton. You folks now starting to see that wind really crank up around the eye. You can see it in motion. And not only that, but you're getting some squalls of very heavy rain. We're going to get daylight here in about an hour or so, and we'll start to see what the visibility is doing when these bands are coming through. Plus, we'll obviously start to see what we're dealing with as far as damage. And I know that we're getting pictures. I'll have some pictures with Mallory in just a second. But let's take a look again at the eye. Let me zoom on in. It is east of Cape Canaveral. Tilt this up just a little bit, just give you a different perspective here. And as I spin around this storm, notice the motion here and how it's actually swirling back toward the coast. And this is actually kicking back some very heavy squalls and some very nasty conditions out toward the launch pads at Cape Canaveral. And this is where we're starting to pick up the wind. And I know we have Christina Jensen up at the Daytona Beach EOC. Christina, wind starting to increase in that general area, I'm assuming. To get back to you in just a second, Christina. Obviously, with all of the weather going on, it's playing havoc with some of the equipment. That's going to be the case. We've had power hits out in the field as well, because we're seeing even some of our cameras go dark occasionally, or the landscape going dark occasionally. You saw in Jerry's live shot, you saw some of the transformers which seemed to be blowing in the background, and those were coming on down, coming back up. Just looking at some of the strong wind gusts that are coming out of the Daytona Beach area. Did you say Christina's ready again? Oh, the sparking. Oh, you've got the video. Great. Okay, so Jerry was doing a live shot earlier, and behind him you could see the flashes of power, the transformers that were blowing in the distance, and there it is. And notice even some of the sparks shooting out as power lines, and occasionally are getting brushed or beat down by some of those branches. And that's why we are expecting large portions of Brevard and Volusia County to lose power. If you haven't lost power yet, you're more than likely seeing flashes and hits, and at some point you will probably go dark for a while. We don't know how long, because we obviously don't know the extent of the damage that's going to be done yet, because it's dark and we're just getting into some of the worst conditions. But crews are obviously going to be out there at first break of daylight to try and get some of this repaired if there's no danger. If there's a danger, which there still is going to be for a few hours after sunrise even, then you're going to be without power for a while. And some of you could be out for quite a while, like a few days, potentially a week. So this is why we've been telling you all week to prepare. Just get yourself ready. And again, the phrase, if you haven't heard it, we've been using it here at News 13 for at least a year and a half now. Don't be scared. just be prepared. And that's the best advice we can give you, because then that gets you set in a mindset where you're a little more calm when you're going into a situation like this. And I know it's a situation to get yourself worked up in, because it's a hurricane, a massive hurricane, powerful. You've been hearing words like catastrophic, destructive, killer, all that stuff. That's not the tone we want to take here at News 13, because we want you to be like us, calm and in the situation, because then your mind and you're in that right frame of mind and know when it's time to get either inland and take advantage of the opportunities before the storm moves in, or you've prepped yourself to the max, you've got your supplies, the power goes out, you lose the ability to use water, you've got all that taken care of. And then you can sit and wait this out as we walk you through this, and just pray that it continues to roll on out. It's not going to make a landfall on the Cape. At this point, it can't do so because it's not going to sharply turn left and go toward the Cape. Will it wobble back and forth? Yes. And this is why we've said, Volusia County, Flagler County, watch it, because if it starts turning north, breathe a big sigh of relief. If it wobbles west, you're getting a little closer, but it's going to have to come a long way west to touch land at this point. If it were to get anywhere near Florida land for a touch, it would be way up toward Jacksonville, and right now that doesn't look likely because of the shape of the land around Florida, the coastline shape, and because of the way the eye is moving and the speed it's moving. Obviously, it's going to take several hours to get out of our particular area and beyond Flagler County, but as we're watching this wobble a little bit more to the north-northwest, and eventually you see north, and you can go, okay, I know for sure the strongest part of this is going to stay offshore. We're still going to get impacts. We're still kicking the wind up. We're getting gusts even inland, Seminole, Orange, and Osceola County between 40 and 55 miles per hour right now. The strongest winds, though, will stay offshore. Winds in Brevard County, especially northern and central, all the way up into Volusia County, are still going to exceed, the gusts are still going to exceed 100 for a while, as we are now at 6:41 and the extreme wind warning is in place until 7:15. I'm going to do some radar analysis here. So, Mallory, I know you've got at least a picture of something coming in now. Is this damage? Is that what we're seeing in the picture?
We'll switch sources
here. Yeah, let me
here.
switch sources for you. My bad. There we go. They're here. Whoop. Sorry, I don't mean to throw you there with the source change, but there you go.
Yeah, there we go. There's that picture from Francisco. This is in the Ogallie area of Brevard County. Not much damage in that shot, but certainly showing some of the heavier rain. We have gotten some shots showing some trees down in areas from some of those higher wind gusts, and we appreciate your photos, but definitely keep yourself safe before sending in any of those shots, and just make sure that you are inside in a safe shelter as the storm continues to pass off just to the east of us. Now, I do want to show you the latest update. Now, we're waiting for the 7 o'clock update to come in. Should be coming in soon, but this is the 6 o'clock hour. Wind speeds at 120 miles per hour, moving off to the northwest at about 14 miles per hour. And the last couple of frames here on this radar picture maybe starting to turn a little more to the north, as Brian was mentioning a little while ago. That's good news. That will hopefully keep this center of circulation away from the east coast, and if that's the case, it will keep the high hurricane force winds offshore. But of course, we've gotten a lot of reports of wind gusts over hurricane storm status there along the east coast and even a little farther inland with those tropical storm force winds. Quick update on the track here. It is expected to remain a Category 3 until about 2 o'clock this afternoon. But notice the wind speed starting to drop back just a little bit at 115, even more so as we head through tonight and into early on Saturday at 105. That's a Category 2. At that point, it's going to be off the coast of Georgia. So conditions will start to improve through the overnight hours. We might get a little bit of rain. Still going to be pretty windy throughout the day on Saturday. So things will start to improve, but still going to be dealing with those high winds here over about the next 24 to 36 hours. And I do want to show you the wave heights again with those strong winds continuing to push the water close to the coast here as we get toward about 12 o'clock. We could see some pretty good coastal flooding here as we do have those high wave heights anywhere from 11 to 18 feet in Brevard County. A little farther to the north, also looking at some of those higher wave heights. And when you have high wave heights and that wind just continuing to push that wall of water toward the coastline, there is a storm surge possibility here, and we are seeing the potential for some of that storm surge anywhere from around 9 to 13 feet, especially north of where that center of circulation is right now, where we do have those winds straight out of the west. Now things are starting to switch in southern Brevard County, maybe a little more out of the west here and pushing offshore as opposed to pushing onshore. So conditions starting to maybe get a little bit better in terms of storm surge across southern Brevard County, but still the potential for some beach erosion, some minor coastal flooding, as well as some high wind gusts in those areas. So a little bit of concern there. Now I do want to show you our futurecast. As we head toward about 7 o'clock, notice where the eye wall is. That's what we're seeing as we approach the 7 o'clock hour here in about 15 minutes. So this particular model doing pretty good on this storm track. And as we head toward about 8 o'clock, still going to be seeing a lot of water being pushed inland as it skirts up the east coast by lunchtime. Still going to be a lot of rain, especially across our northern counties as we head into this afternoon. Maybe starting to improve across our southern counties early afternoon. Still a little bit of rain across the north, and still a few showers even as we head into this evening, but conditions starting to look a lot better. Although again, those high winds will be sticking around for the next about 24 hours. So again, tonight it's going to be rainy and windy. Things will start to clear up just a little bit. And for more on the radar picture, I'll send it back over to Brian.
All right, thank you, Mallory. Yeah, the radar picture is still pretty impressive. Storm Tracker 13 Doppler radar, pretty impressive. I'm going to switch those. Thank you very much. And let's see, we got if you guys want to check in on that local statement. Here's some good news for Southwest Florida. And for those of you who may have friends and family, Hardee County, Sarasota County, southward, the tropical storm watches warnings are expired for those areas now. Still in effect for points like Tampa, St. Pete, and some of the surrounding areas over towards Sumter County. You're still in that tropical storm warning. Some of the wind is trying to get to you, most of it along our east coast and just offshore. Good news here as well. Look in the last few frames, and Mallory, Mo, check out the wobble. Are you guys seeing? It looks like it's a north wobble. Yeah, and we have to. One of the things we do is we each stare. I know it sounds odd, but we stare at that eye and we watch it just for several rotations to see if we're looking at a pattern. And if you guys, I don't know if you're seeing the same thing or my eyes are just deceiving me. It looks like it's turning north.
Yeah, I am. I mentioned just a little while ago, the last couple of frames, it does look like more of a northward push. The latest update, though, still on that north-northwest track at about 13 miles per hour.
We'll see here. We got a 7 o'clock, right?
I was going to say, we have new numbers coming in. I'm looking at the weather flow gauges, the different gauges that are around the area. And one thing that's important to note is when the winds turn around to the west, it's going to be a sign that the storm is moving more to the north, and Cape Canaveral and Cocoa Beach, your winds there more to the northwest or west-northwest. So a sign that, yes, it is moving away and moving more to the north. Again, we're going to get a update on that within the next 10 minutes or so. I've been trying to call up our cameras to give you an indication of what's happening around Central Florida. Of course, we show you our cameras every day here with your Weather on the Ones, but of course, with connectivity issues and these winds, it's been hard to show them. If you want to take this full, and I'll go over to the wall with this, the cameras that you're looking at here, of course, the one downtown, you can see pretty well. I just stepped outside to see what conditions were like here downtown. Definitely windy, warm, humid, and raining, of course. And then the other cameras, I know we can't really see very much, but I've been watching the Cocoa Beach camera, and this has shown a decrease in the lights, just an indication of perhaps some power outages in the area. Sunrise will be in about 30 minutes, so we'll be able to see a little bit more. And this is the Ruin Zipper Camp, the Ocean Deck Restaurant in Daytona Beach. I know you can't really see much, but when you get those still images as they update, we have seen the lights are kind of shaking around a bit with the structures in the area. And as the sun comes up, if you see damage where you are, of course, if you're in a safe place, please share those photos with us on our app News 13 Plus. And should your power go out, this would be a way for you to get information, get those alerts pushed directly to your mobile device or tablet. And this also will give you the hurricane updates too when we get those coming in from the National Hurricane Center. So there's a lot of information you can get on that app, which will be critical if you lose power. Now, we've been watching the bands of the steadiest rain and the most intense winds on the north side of the low. And this is good because, of course, it's out over the water and not over land. Throughout the morning, we had a northwesterly track as it was moving closer to southern Brevard County, and then a northwesterly track. And if you look in the last couple of frames, as Brian was mentioning, we're seeing perhaps more of a northward movement. I want to go in and show you the close-up view of these bands that are just lashing the far tip of the Cape, and the most intense bands are just along the border. You can see right there, that's where that's the edge of the coast, and then it's pretty much parallel where we have the intense rainfall. So Titusville, Mims, a lot of this, if it travels to the north, it would move away from you. Of course, within these areas, we're still dealing with torrential rain and very strong winds. But this area, the core of the most intense rain and winds surrounding the eye, seem to be out over the water right now. I've been looking at those rainfall rates in the area because they have warranted flood warnings. The counties highlighted here in the light green shaded area, those are your flood warnings, which means flooding is imminent or occurring. And we also have a flood watch pretty much area wide, at least from Orange County off to the east, and that continues through tonight. Been looking at the 3D perspective of this map, which really shows that the most intense rain is on the north side because that's where the taller clouds are, or the vertical structure is a little bit more apparent. The taller the cloud, the more intense the storm, and those appear to be on the northern edge of the low. We still have rain and wind. In fact, this batch right here that's moving over inland of Volusia County and eastern sections of Orange County, producing some very heavy rain at this time. So far, the greatest rainfall estimates have been off the coast, plotting them here on Storm Tracker 13. A lot of them are going to stay out over the water, of course, but inland, some 4 to 8 inches as Matthew moves to the north, then eventually continues to bring us rain throughout the afternoon. But those steadiest rainfall rates as detected by radar, again, now we're looking at the tip of the Cape here, and these up to the north. So should those continue to travel away from the Cape, we'll keep the heaviest rain out over the water. Here are the latest coordinates. Again, we're going to have a new update on Matthew within the next 10 minutes or so. The northwesterly movement was apparent with the 7 o'clock advisory, or rather the 6 o'clock, winds to 120 miles near the center of circulation, and the pressure trend had been decreasing throughout the morning. So your forecast and riding as we've been bringing you throughout the day, tropical storm, hurricane conditions, and these will continue especially along the coastline in Brevard County, where our winds have been over 80 to 100 miles per hour. So, Brian, I don't know if you're seeing any new information or if you got something that you want to show now.
Yeah, I'm looking at the wobble again, and we all have been talking about that northward jog, and here in about 9 minutes, maybe, and hopefully a little sooner, we get that 7 a.m. advisory in, but it's definitely looking like it's trending a little bit more on the north side. And Maureen, as you mentioned, it looks like the heaviest bands are staying offshore right now. We got a new one that's coming in. It's going to be crossing Mosquito Lagoon. So those of you in Eldora, Oak Hill, Creighton, going to see a rain pickup, as well as probably the wind gusts in the bands of rain. And looking upstream, we've got bands of light to occasionally moderate rain passing through Flagler County, Bunnell over toward Andalusia. Looking all the way over toward Marion County, you've got some light to moderate rain out toward Bellevue and Ocala, and this extends down toward the villages. I'm seeing a little bit of light rain extending, even some moderate bursts into parts of Southern Lake, and then over into western Orange. Here in Orlando, we're getting, it looks like 2 or 3 different little bands of some moderate rain rotating on in. But the eye, once again, and as I zoom in, the eye staying offshore. So we will not see a landfall at the Cape. We will not see a landfall at the Cape because it can't jog that far west at the movements to the north-northwest, and potentially even a northerly track now a little bit. So it's going to stay offshore, but not by much. And that's why we're saying we're still going to see some pretty destructive winds I-95 eastward from central and northern Brevard up into southern Volusia County. Winds that have been up to 100+ miles per hour in a couple of locations. The winds cranking again, it sounds like, in Melbourne. I know we have wind and rain in the Melbourne area just occurring right now, and this is a live shot. Jerry Hume asking crews in-house here in the Weather Center if it's safe to move, and we said no, not yet. Just kind of hold on for a while. Keep yourself in that safe spot you've got set up, and check back with us probably about 7:30 or 8. We've got daylight at that point, and we'll see what the wind is doing. But if you look at the light left side of your screen, and I know some of you can't see it because you're either listening to us or you're away and you could hear us. There's a light to the left, a street light, and I'm seeing sheets of rain and the tree below it whipping in that wind. And so those are some of the gusts that are coming around. But now those gusts in Melbourne coming from the northwest around the backside of the storm. The strongest winds, the strongest rain, or the strongest storms on the north and east side of the storm. I want to take a look at the radar product, Storm Tracker 13 Doppler radar, but I'm going to turn it into wind mode again and check out the colors and notice the counterclockwise motion. The eye is located right here. It's not very far offshore, but it's not going to touch the Cape at this point. But the bright whites on the south side, looks like they're wrapping in the southeast side now. I'm going to pause this for a second. They are upwards of 85 to 95 miles per hour. The pink, the bright pink, I'm looking at on the north and west side of the eye. And the brightest colors here, 107, 101, 97, 95. So 95 to 107. Radar estimated wind speeds at this point. Some of this is just off the surface, and it's translating close to the ground. Some of these gusts making it to the ground. And right now, some of that purple has stretched itself down across the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, as well as Cape Canaveral and the launch pads. So some of that's still trying to go toward the coast, but a bulk of that has stayed offshore. The worst of it, I should say, has stayed offshore. And the activity east of Melbourne and in the Atlantic is translating away from you out to sea. So, as we've been talking about, we'll get some of the stronger winds coming in a couple of bands up toward Edgewater. We had the gust earlier to 71, I believe I saw. Oak Hill, Shiloh, and points surrounding. I'm getting some other alerts coming on in. Our 7 o'clock update. Maureen, you've got that northwest still 15?
14, sorry.
14. Okay, well, it's still, I think it was either 13 or 14 at 6.
With a peak gust of 107 on the tip of Cape Canaveral. Yep,
that's okay. And Mallory, you mentioned that one a little earlier to us.
Yeah.
So it's still moving north-northwest. Okay, interesting.
35 miles to the east-northeast of Cape Canaveral.
East-northeast. Thus, again, the reason we can say with certainty it won't make the Cape.
So it would be east-northeast as opposed
so
to directly
now
east.
it's out farther from land. And continuing on that track, here, let me draw it out for you.
So the last one was 25, right?
Yeah. Yep. So, and it was due east at that point, and that was an hour ago. So now it's east-northeast by a bit. And let me just draw a wiggly old line because it's wobbling. But at north-northwest, and with little bobs back and forth, look at that. Look how far offshore it takes it. And this actually kind of goes with the consensus models that we've been looking at. They've all been very narrow, keeping it offshore, curling it north and then northeast, east of Jacksonville, and up the coast. Okay, so a lot of questions, a lot of people looking at, I had people in my neighborhood questioning it as well. Is this going to wrap back around and hit us again? That's not what we need to be focused on right now. We need to be focused on what's happening right now, and that is a major hurricane. Did you say the winds are still at 120?
Yes.
Category 3 hurricane sitting so close to our east coast. Winds to 100 miles per hour over toward I-95 eastward. Volusia County, southern Volusia County, northern Brevard County. We have that extreme wind warning for another 17, 18 minutes, and that's for northeastern Brevard County because we've been translating some of that wind to the ground. What's happening with that system and curling back around would be toward the middle and end of next week. Toward the middle and end of next week. Is it a possibility? Yes. It's something we'll start tracking a little more. I just want to give you that heads up because there's been a lot of people asking about it. That and Hurricane Nicole, which, by the way, the afterthought that Nicole has been today You probably didn't even know that Nicole hit Category 2 status out south of Bermuda. It's wobbling. Eventually, by Wednesday, it's kicking back out to the North Atlantic. But we're actually watching Matthew could curl back as a tropical storm middle of next week, end of next week. And if we were to watch the models, they're pointing towards South Florida. Long ways out. So again, we're focused on Matthew, and right now we want to focus on Flagler County and get an update as that wind is starting to carry up the coast just a bit. Still a few 3-4 hours, maybe 5 hours from getting the worst conditions up toward Flagler Beach and Palm Coast. But David Bowden in Flagler Beach, and David, obviously getting some rounds of rain, a little bit of wind, but and actually as I'm looking at your shot right now, it doesn't look bad.
Well, it's coming and going, like you've been talking about, these bands that come through. Let me give you a first-hand glimpse at what's going on here. The wind is blowing the rain almost horizontally, so it is actually fairly bad. Not that we've seen some worse gusts of wind pass through this area. We've also seen the lights go out. So there's things going on around the county that are obviously being caused by Matthew, but